So I did a video about the UK's pathetic response to coronavirus about a week ago. I'm sorry I had to say it. Since then, they've done a complete U-turn on their herd immunity policy. Before the consensus was that, okay, well, everyone should just get infected, and if a few people die, it is what it is. That's the chief scientific advisor to the UK government saying that. Dramatically, they changed that position, and they've done a stricter lockdown than anything else I've seen. The UK has implemented a 6-month lockdown. Let's take a look at the article. The UK coronavirus lockdown will last for up to 6 months and be policed with on-the-spot fines. Again, you're not allowed to leave your home unless it's for essential work, exercise, or to buy food or medicine. All non-essential shops, premises, and places of worship will be closed down, with weddings and baptisms banned. The rules will be enforced by the police, with fines between £30 rising up to 1,000 bob for repeated infringement. Let me just say a quick word on this. You're a little late to the party, okay? Boris Johnson himself has caught coronavirus after bragging that he shakes everybody's hands and he's just not afraid.
No, well, Victoria, I can tell you that I'm shaking hands continuously. I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody. You'll be pleased to know, and I continue to shake hands. And I think it's very important that we, people obviously can make up their own minds. I think Matt has said that people must make up their own minds, but I think the scientific evidence is, well, I'll hand over to the experts. But our judgment is wash. Washing your hands is the crucial thing.
Hi folks, I want to bring you up to speed with something that's happening today, which is that I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus. That's to say, a temperature and a persistent cough. And on the advice of the chief medical officer, I've taken a test that has come out positive. So I am working from home, I'm self-isolating, and that's entirely the right thing to do.
Most countries in the world already understood that herd immunity is not the best strategy. You need to quarantine people. You need to lock down the entire country. Just until a few days ago, the UK is like, yeah, whatever. So well done, but you're late. And I'm going to give credit. I think 6 months is perhaps the reasonable thing to do. This thing is not going to go away anytime soon. Contrast that with what's happening in the US, where Donald Trump is saying, yeah, we just got to go back to normal on April 13th after Easter Sunday, even though they never deviated from normal because there was no lockdown. There was no mass mobilization to combat this thing. So, okay, I'll give credit for the 6-month lockdown period, but again, you're way too late. Locking down the country is one thing. Having universal healthcare is one thing, but when you underfund it, you are going to screw yourself. You shot yourself in the foot because right now you are having a crisis in the NHS. Even before coronavirus, just before it hit, the NHS at 94% bed capacity. 94%. Right now they're paying £2.4 million a day to lease beds from private companies. This is highway robbery. Why were these outsourced? Why were private companies allowed to do that in the first place? This is what happens when you chip away at your public services. On top of that, the NHS staff, the nurses and the doctors, who are the true heroes here, who are doing their best to fight this pandemic, are being underfunded. They're being treated like crap. They're not being compensated. It is really abysmal. Intensive care nurse Lauren says frightened NHS workers are using unsterilized masks and filters as she slammed Health Secretary Matt Hancock.
My concerns is that yesterday morning me and my colleagues received a message to say that due to shortages, we would now have to share masks. Well, a week ago, we were told we needed to share masks, which are very similar to this. This is my husband's, which he has now given me to take to work. And yesterday it was, we need to share filters. Now, filters have got bacteria in them. Masks have got bacteria in them. These things do not get sterilised like you would your operating equipment. They're not sterilised. My concern was that my manager asked us to share these masks with an apology, a sincere apology, because we do not have the equipment. Matt Hancock And this government have had 4 months to prepare for this. China didn't have 4 months. They had less than a week. We have had 4 months to prepare.
This is embarrassing. No country should have to deal with shortages like this in a pandemic. Never mind one that already has single-payer healthcare, and especially the NHS, which you know is like crème de la crème, the top of the top, the best of the best. What is this? This is inexcusable. As you can see here at this Guardian article, the Department of Health rejected high-level medical advice about providing NHS staff with certain protective equipment during an influenza pandemic because stockpiling it would be too expensive, the Guardian can reveal. The documents may help explain a devastating shortage of protective gear in the NHS that is hampering efforts by medical staff to manage the COVID-19 virus pandemic. Doctors are threatening to quit the profession unless they are properly equipped, and NHS trusts across England have been asking schools to donate science goggles due to the shortages. So basically, they skimped out, they were too cheap, they didn't want to spend the money, and now, in an emergency, they have no goggles. One intensive care nurse at a hospital in Yorkshire told The Guardian earlier this week she had to spend 100 quid of her own money to buy a full FFP3 respirator mask online. In her unit on Monday, there were no masks or surgical gowns. Another vital piece of PPE kit, which has also been in short supply. What a fucking disgrace. Criminal negligence. And this is what happens when you have a government that refuses to do anything. Like I said, just until a few days ago, just until Monday. Okay, the UK's position was herd immunity. This is absolutely inexcusable and has nothing to do with whether you have a single-payer healthcare system or not. Okay, if these countries in Europe didn't have a single-payer healthcare system, it would be even worse. Even worse. I have another thing to show you here. NHS workers' fury that Prince Charles had to test with mild symptoms. Both the Prince of Wales and Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, have been tested for COVID-19, has angered doctors and nurses who can't get tested and risk infecting patients. The people who are risking their lives, the people who are doing 12, 14, whatever hour shifts in the hospitals, the NHS staff, there's no tests available. They're not being tested. No one is taking them seriously. But the royals, oh, they get tested, of course, of course. And of course, we can't test the peasants, the common folk. We have to test Prince Charles, that boy. Yes. What am I supposed to say here? I mean, not only is that completely disrespectful to the heroes in the NHS, but on top of it, this is blatant stupidity. I mean, nurses, doctors are coming into contact with tons of people. You're risking them infecting others because you refuse to test them. Even people showing symptoms are not being tested. What is this? This is a Banana Republic response. Who the fuck cares about testing the fucking Duchess of Cornwall? Did I just commit treason? They're going to lock me away in the Tower of London. Doctors and nurses say they risk infecting patients and their families, and they may needlessly have to isolate at home, meaning they are unable to care for the sick. You're putting people out of work on the front lines. You're putting these soldiers out of action in a time of need because you refuse to test them. They may not have COVID-19. They may have it. Who knows? You won't test them. This is double stupidity. They, meaning doctors and nurses, want priority testing for staff so they can remain in work and treat patients. And a petition demanding this has been signed by more than 1 million people. Could you be any more stupid? The first people in the fucking country that you should be testing for COVID-19 are the nurses and the doctors so they don't infect other people. You fucking buffoons, you blundering idiots. Those are the first people you should test. Look at this. Dr. Naveed wrote, "Why am I refused to test after seeing patients with COVID infections?" And Prince Charles or any celebrity can get a test within seconds. We are playing Russian roulette with minimal protection, leaving behind our families who are constantly worrying if we're still alive every night. Dr. Mike wrote, "Nurses here coughing and unwell and told to go home. No test." But Prince Charles, with mild symptoms, he gets tested. NHS workers are like cannon fodder, he says. We are expendable. We will die soon. Will anyone really care? This is another example. This is further proof of how the elites don't give a shit about you. They don't care if you're a civilian. They don't care if you're literally working in healthcare, in hospitals, if you're on the front lines. They don't give a shit. They come first every single time, even with something as trivial as a COVID-19 test. Their interests come first. Their profits come first. Their health comes first. Always. Not just the US. This is everywhere. We're seeing a pattern here, aren't we? We're seeing a pattern of working class people getting fucked over. Very peculiar, isn't it? As I said, the NHS is the crown jewel of the UK. People around the UK have taken part now in a clap for carers tribute, saluting NHS and care workers dealing with the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, people got nothing but love for these doctors and nurses because they know how hard they work. It is really a shame that they're not being given the proper equipment, they're not being treated properly, they're not being compensated properly, their concerns aren't being taken seriously. When they're putting their lives at risk, that has to end. You want to hear about something even worse now that even I didn't know? So in the UK, if you come to work in the NHS and you're not a British citizen, you have to pay the government. Very cool, right? NHS staff fighting coronavirus are being charged to go to work at a time of national crisis. For those that aren't aware, the immigration health surcharge adds £400 a year to the cost of a UK visa per person. This means an NHS worker with a family of 4 is required to pay fees of £1,600 a year. Under new government plans, the fees are set to rise to £624 a year per person and will also be applied to NHS staff from the EU from next January. There are more than 153,000 staff from overseas working inside the NHS, with 1 in 4 hospital staff from outside the UK. It is disgraceful that our government was ever charging these people to work in our NHS and save lives, but to carry on charging them during a national health crisis is absurd. They are heroes. They will save our grandparents, our parents and friends. They deserve gratitude, not a bill. You shouldn't be forcing doctors and nurses who come to your country to work in your national health service. You shouldn't be making them pay to be there, especially when you have a shortage of 40,000 nurses, when you have been underfunding your healthcare system. This is ridiculous. It's grotesque. Not to mention in a time of a pandemic where they have to risk their lives, they risk infecting their families maybe. This is so irresponsible and gross, okay? These people are literally heroes. They're filling jobs that are crucial to public health and public safety that you failed to fill, and you're making them pay. You should be paying them. You should be compensating them for being here. The fact that they can't even provide them with masks, the fact that they're not even testing them, but they have the resources magically to test the royal family. This is unfair treatment. This is unacceptable. So you've seen in the US with the stimulus package, they're going to give every adult $1,200, a one-time payment. That's it. Now in the UK, they've had a better approach to this. They took care of regular employees by making sure that they're going to receive up to 80% of their earnings, which means that companies won't have to lay people off. That's a good thing. But now they still haven't taken care of people who are self-employed. They haven't taken care of people who are gig workers. Jeremy Corbyn was talking about this earlier, and he made a really good point. I'm not going to play you the whole speech, but he seemed to be the only one in the parliament actually talking about this stuff. The point that I wanted to get to is, do you remember how quickly, at the snap of a finger, the UK government magically found £330 billion for businesses? Do you remember how quickly the Federal Reserve magically gave Wall Street $1.2 trillion, and I think it's racked up to $6 trillion now. I can't keep up. Yet, when it comes to the peasants and the common folk, oh, I'm sorry, we can only give you a one-time payment of $1,200. And in the UK, it's like, oh, well, we'll cover some of the workers, but not the self-employed ones, and not the gig workers. And we're only going to give you 80% of your salary. And we're going to take our time to do that. And we're going to neglect our nurses and doctors by failing to provide them with the necessary equipment to deal with this crisis. Do you notice the pattern here? How businesses and corporations, the trickle-down economics, they always get their cash immediately with no strings attached, and you don't even know if that money is going to trickle down in the first place. If you're a part of the working class, if you're an average Joe, well, we can't give you 100% of your salary. We can't give you, real money. I'm sorry. Are you seeing the pattern here? Are you seeing the pattern? Are you seeing how corporations and businesses always come first and the workers come last? Are you seeing what's going on? Yeah. It's disgusting, isn't it?